Let's learn Biber's Passacaglia. We'll stop right there. Hello fellow instrumentalists, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jacques Gadway, and this is Gadway Violin. In today's video, we're finally doing another one. We're taking a look at a piece that I've never played. And if you're not new to the channel, then you probably already know this is called Making Decisions on Violin. In this series, I take a look at a piece of music that I either haven't played before or haven't played in quite some time. Based off of a comment on a previous video, somebody wanted me to take a look at the Passacaglia by Franz von Biber. Heinrich Ignaz von... by Biber. Biber's Passacaglia is a piece that I'm definitely familiar with. I've heard a bunch of times, and when I went to college, all of my studio mates would practice it and learn it. And honestly, I just didn't really like it, so I never asked my teacher if I could learn it, and I never really wanted to learn it. But thanks to one of my subscribers and a comment in a previous video, today we're going to take a look at it, and hopefully I'll finally learn the Passacaglia. So in this series, I, a professional violinist, take a look at a piece of music through the lens of it being essentially my first time playing it. And so hopefully you, the viewer, can learn alongside me and learn some of the tips and tricks that I use when taking first glance at a new piece of music. In this case, a very difficult new piece of music. So when I sat down today and downloaded this music off of IMSLP and set up the tripod for this shot, I went straight into looking at what this piece has to offer. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of really difficult repertoire. There are some moments of respite, but overwhelmingly it is difficult. And it's easy when taking a look at a piece of music for the first time to get overwhelmed. But the first thing that you should do is figure out what the piece even is. What's the vibe? Well, first off, this piece by Biber is a Passacaglia. It's not just the title of the piece, it's also what it is. A Passacaglia is a kind of form used very frequently in the Baroque period. What it is essentially is the composer takes, in this case, a 4-note bass line, but it can really be any amount of notes, a bass line that is consistent, and they essentially create a theme and variations. In a normal theme and variations, there will be a melody that's established, and then you create variations on that melody. The essential difference between that and a Passacaglia is that rather than it being a real melody, it's just a bass line. So when we first look at this piece of music, let's deduce what the bass line is. The bass line for this Passacaglia is going to be these 4 notes. It's not always going to sound exactly the same, but we want to make sure wherever we are in the piece that that form stays consistent. Now, some people might say that your phrasing in your Passacaglia should be identical throughout. Your 4 bass notes should have a specific direction that you've decided at the beginning, and it should be held throughout the theme and variations. I don't think that that's the case. I think that we can really fluctuate in each variation depending on what each variation has to offer. I'm also a firm believer that each variation is often going to give us new material that's more interesting, and that the idea of highlighting the bass line is not always going to be necessary. Some people believe that you want to keep in a Passacaglia the bass line very prevalent throughout, and you certainly can do that. But I actually believe that the listener is going to hear it regardless, because it's the first thing they hear and it happens throughout on its own. So we don't need to necessarily pay too much effort into creating and reinforcing it all the time, and rather we should look into what changes from phrase to phrase. In this video, I'm going to go through maybe the first page, maybe the first page and a half, and I'm going to talk about what fingerings I'm using and what choices I'm making, as per the title, Making Decisions on the Violin. So let's jump right in. We played the first few lines, but let's play them again so that we can get comfortable and talk about what I'm doing. We're obviously starting in first position. I'm not big on the idea of no vibrato in Baroque music. I think you can do some vibrato for sure. And I think there's going to be moments in this piece where we can do a lot of vibrato. But to start, to make it very pristine and clear, I'm going to go ahead and use very little vibrato at the beginning. And I'm also going to use that open D. In those next two measures, we're starting to add in some double stops. We can see that a new phrase is being added on top of the bass line. The decision we have to make here is how do we want to articulate? Do we want to keep the bass line the same, where we're actually holding it? Or do we want to come off it slightly for both clarity and to highlight the new movement? In that example, I was essentially coming off of the D string note for about a 16th note. Not coincidentally, that's when we change to the 16th note in the phrase, and I think it's a nice way to give it some room in the phrase. So I like that. I'm not going to sustain the bass note too long. I'm going to give it a little bit of space each of these double stops. Another benefit I should say really quickly is that because I'm doing that, when I reignite that D string, there's a little bit more of an emphasis, which does give us that kind of bassy feel. So here, out of necessity, I do have to get off the bass notes a little bit earlier. Because I got to get to that E string, because we're going to have to be on that A string in first position for that next triple stop. So because of this, in anticipation, within that specific 4-note bass line, we actually probably want to make all of those bass notes sound pretty consistent. So when we take a look at measure 6, we really need to come off of that E flat pretty quickly. Which means that the previous bass notes in that particular iteration should pretty much match. So that means we're going to come off a little earlier here. Because it's kind of weird to be in a specific iteration and to change all of a sudden what that bass note sounds like. Moving on, we're in measure 7 now, and we have pretty much the same idea, just with a little bit of rhythmic variation. So my question here, to myself, and to you as well, is what should I do with the bass notes here? Assuming that I want to maintain the open D on the D natural in measure 8, then really I cannot sustain that D while playing the F sharp that follows, which means I won't have a double stop in that part. Does that mean that I should accommodate that by not having a double stop any of the other times? Or does that mean that I should change the fingering so I can have a double stop? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Because here in measure 8, we're never getting that double stop, we could either create that by doing a G string, which I don't love because we get rid of that beautiful open D sound, or we can make it so that the notes that precede it do the same thing where they don't have a double stop. Now it sounds more consistent. Notice before I was doing double stops. Now all of a sudden when I do the double stops, the F sharp sounds like it's all on its own. It's a hard choice because the double stops sound great, but I don't love playing the D on the G string. So I think personally the best move is probably to just not do the double stops. All right, let's take a look at measure 9. This is tricky stuff. First of all, it's tricky to figure out the rhythms. So let's take a look. We're holding a G natural there. And when does our B flat, E flat come in? It's the same idea as we see in measure 7, right? So it should be the same rhythm. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Now the question is, when do those 30 seconds come in? They're going to start right after that third eighth note of the measure. So another way we could visualize this and think of it is like the E flat is the first of 4 30-second notes. And the D as well. The way that it's written is simply to show us the difference in voices. We essentially have an alto and a treble voice here. Treble. Which is a very classic Baroque idea, separating the instrument into multiple voices. Going on from measure 10. Let's figure out a bowing. Okay, if we just do it as it comes, it works out. This has all basically been in first position. Generally, in Baroque music, it's fine if you're on a 5 chord to just add a little bit of a trill or any kind of ornamentation. So that's why here on this D major chord, I kind of instinctively just add a little trill there for that cadence. All that's in first position, pretty simple. Here's our first real tricky triple stop. This is measure 13. The reason it's tricky is because we have a fifth, and fifths are so difficult to play fingered, especially if you use the fingering that I'm using, which is to stay in first position, which means we're playing a fifth on our third finger. Generally, we want to play fifths on our first and second finger when at all possible. But if you're experienced enough and your fingers are a little bit fatter in the tips like mine, then you're actually quite okay, at least if we don't get too high on the instrument, to play a fifth with the third fingers. Some alternatives would be to shift after the triple stop D major chord to that first finger on the G. Now you're in second position, which is a little bit more easy on the hand to find that fifth. Whatever fingering you choose, once you've played the triple stop, I like the idea of releasing onto only the middle string, meaning that we allow the middle string to linger a little bit longer than the others. This will help us bring out the very clear melody that they're trying to show us in this alto. And then likewise on the next 3 eighth notes, we're going to, after that triple stop, linger on the top note because that is the new idea. So for each of these triple stops that are going to be in first position, we're just going to use the bow to linger on whichever note is going to be the new voice. I'll take it back to measure 15 to show you again. Here we're going to change because now we have a duet happening. This is measure 18. After we hit that bass note, E flat octave, we come off that bass note and we start a duet between the treble and alto. So once again, we're hitting those bass notes, but we're coming off of them to highlight what voices are singing the melody. That's something I like to do also occasionally. When I've played Bach in the past, when we come to these sections where we're going to reignite or reinforce the bass notes and we have a triple stop, we want to essentially find a way, if possible, to end on that bass note. Once again, when we play triple stops, we have the opportunity to end those triple stops and linger on a specific voice. In the case of measure 19, I want to end on that bass line. So there's a couple ways we can do it. We can do the fun, kind of fancy roll that I'm doing, where I go up and then right back down. Some people will roll it even more, like I just did, so that it's a little less chordy, but I don't mind the chordy sound. Alternatively, we can play a full triple stop all at once with no roll, and then just end on the bass note. But that option sounds a tad aggressive for this, don't you think? So given the style and vibe, again, vibe is a big thing for Baroque era. I don't think they use that word. They use something like affect or something like that. But we're going to use vibe today. To stay in the vibe, we're going to use that roll. All that's just in first position. One thing to note is when we're preparing those triple stops within this vibe, again, we want to make sure that the previous note, the preceding note, is taking us as much as possible in preparation for that triple stop. The less prepared you are for a triple stop, the more aggressive it's likely to sound. So we're using that F natural in measure 21 at the end of the measure, that F natural up bow. Even though it's just a 16th note, we have to use a lot of bow during the note and right after the note to give us connective tissue to the start of that triple stop that follows. All right, moving on to measure 23. Measures 23 and 24 are pretty straightforward. We're just kind of following the tessitura for our phrasing. But then measure 25, for me, even though we have a stream of 16th notes and they're sharing a beaming, I think that we actually still have multiple voices here. We have a bass note, we have an alto voice, and then we have a treble. Bass. And then in measures 27 through 30, once again, we have multiple voices, even though we have a stream of 16th notes with no double stops. For me, it seems natural here to use this open A, this is measure 30, to do a little shift and get us into second position. The reason I'm going into second position is not just to hit that C natural, but so that we're in second position to accommodate for that fifth. Once again, if possible, we generally want to shift so that we can play a fifth on either a first or second finger. In second position, in measure 31, we now can play that fifth, G and D, with our second finger. And just like before, we're using our bow to highlight the actual melody. I'm going to turn this way so that you can actually see the way that my bow is maneuvering. Okay, so far so good. Let's talk about what I just did. We are in second position to start at 31. Then we shift down to first here for 32. We shift up to third here for the B flat. We're already in third. I like it. We stay in third here. Now the question is, what do we do here? We can either shift down to first or second. If we shift down to first, we don't have to shift again, which is quite nice. If we shift to second, we just have to shift twice, but it is still comfortable. Generally, if I can shift once instead of twice, and it's not a difficult shift, I'll go for shifting once. So let's go for the option where we shift to first right away. One thing I'd like to add about the bowing here is that we can do it as it comes, which will result in you having to play some of your triple stops on up bows, or you can do some double ups here and there. I don't really mind either option. So at the start of 37, we're starting down bow, retaking, we just need to end up bow on this trill. So that we can do that same kind of maneuver where we end up highlighting that bass note. Let's look at the last measure of this line. There's a ton of black ink there. So those are 64th notes. That means that we should have 4 of them in a single 16th. We have an 8th note. Above it is a 16th note with 4 64th notes. That adds up. The 8th note is just to show us that Passacaglia bass line again, but it actually is not being played by a different string or different finger. So that means over the course of that 8th note, we got to play all these notes. It's a lot of notes, and I think I like to do it détaché. Let's see. Yeah, so we have 64th notes followed by 32nd notes. They look very similar, but they're different. 32nd notes are half as fast as the 64th notes, and then the 16th notes are even half as fast as that. But as long as you're feeling the 8th note, you should be in good shape. This is a section where I would subdivide 8th notes, most importantly, and then you could further divide in your mind the 16th notes. Past that is going to get a little excessive, I think. So I'm feeling the... Doom, ba dum ga da da ga ba. Thinking of those 8th notes. You can also think of the 16 notes. Boom, ga da ga dun 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 dun, ga da ga dun 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 dun. Let's stop there for today. That is tough stuff. Yeah, this is a really tough piece. So far, this piece has dealt with voicings for double stops and triple stops, as well as really complex rhythms. These excessive divisions are really tricky, and it's important to understand them fully before allowing yourself to get really free with it, I think. So I would try to learn it at a slow tempo, very strict with the rhythm, and then from there, move into being a little bit more free. But the danger is to listen to a recording and try to immediately emulate it and try to create these kind of vague rubatos that don't really make sense, and if you don't have the rhythm actually fully understood, it will be underinformed and actually might end up sounding really quite wrong. I have a rule of thumb with rubato that I really like to preach, and this is that you can change the tempo, but you can't change the rhythm. What I mean by that is whatever your pulse is, you can feel like that pulse speeds up and slows down, but the rhythm respective to that pulse should always be making sense. A good way to think of it is if you had an experienced musician listening to you play and they could hear the pulse. Imagine that there was a metronome that was following your rubato. If there was a metronome speeding up and slowing down alongside you, they should be able to, with that information, very clearly rewrite the rhythms that you're supposed to be playing. So no matter what you do in your rubato, if you slow down a ton or speed up a ton, don't actually allow it to change your rhythm. The one exception to this might be the agogic accent, but make sure that you use these few and far between. The agogic accent is this idea of taking a note and accentuating it by actually lengthening it. If you do it to a single note, it's not that big of a deal. But if you do it at will, all over the place, once again, we start to really change the idea of the rhythm. I'll show you an example of that earlier on in the piece, really quickly before we wrap up. Let's take a look at measure 21. We have a stream of 16th notes. If we make it clear to our audience that we're playing 16th notes, it's okay if we start to make agogic accents on some of these bass notes. So yes, I'm technically changing the rhythm slightly where we're having a kind of longer 16th note than it should be, but as long as some of the other times, and a lot of the other times rather, we don't do that, it's not going to confuse anybody, or it's not going to change the music dramatically. It's just going to help us accentuate what we want. With that, that's all we're going to look at with Passacaglia. This is certainly not a piece you could learn in one day. I certainly couldn't do it, and I'm a professional violinist. So if you are planning on doing that, maybe change your plans and cut out a lot of time for practice. I hope this has been helpful, or at the very least entertaining. If you like this video and you're curious about other pieces of music, or you want to hear more of the Passacaglia, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss a future video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy practicing.